He was Iran's most powerful negotiator, a former general, a man who had survived wars, elections, assassinations, and decades of revolutionary politics. And in a single afternoon, he was gone. Not arrested, not killed, just quietly, brutally removed from the table by the very organization he once served. And the men who removed him are now running Iran. Not the president, not the foreign minister, not even the supreme leader. The men in uniform, the men with the guns. And what they just did will change the Middle East forever. Stay with me until the very end of this video, because the full picture of what is actually happening inside Tehran right now, who is really in control, and what comes next, that does not come together until the final minutes. If you leave early, you will miss the most important part. Let us start from the beginning. To understand what just collapsed, you need to understand what Iran looked like 3 weeks ago, because 3 weeks ago there was still a chance. On April 7, 2026, the United States and Iran agreed to a 2-week ceasefire. 2 months of intense military conflict had finally paused. The blockade was still in place, the economic pain was still real, but the guns had stopped firing, and that mattered. Iran's negotiating team traveled to Islamabad, Pakistan, where Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif and Field Marshal Asim Munir had offered to mediate. 21 hours of talks, Pakistan hosting, the world watching. And the man sitting across the table from American representatives was Mohammad Baqir Ghalibaf. This is a name you need to know. Ghalibaf was not just a politician, he was a former IRGC brigadier general who commanded entire divisions during the Iran-Iraq War. He ran Tehran as its mayor. He ran for president 4 times. He once led Khatam al-Anbiya, the IRGC's massive construction and economic empire, a conglomerate worth tens of billions of dollars. He was the bridge between the hardliners and the pragmatists. He could speak to American diplomats and still get a phone call answered inside IRGC headquarters. If anyone inside Iran's system had the credibility to make a deal, it was him. And now he is gone, because even he was not hard enough for the men who are really in charge. The ceasefire deadline came and went. Iran submitted nothing, no counterproposal, no unified offer, nothing. And on the very same day that Foreign Minister Arakchi announced to the world that the Strait of Hormuz was open, IRGC commanders reportedly opened fire on commercial vessels in the strait. The foreign minister made an announcement. The military ignored it in real time. And then state television called Arakchi a fool. Live, on air, the foreign minister of the Islamic Republic of Iran, publicly humiliated by his own country's state media while he was still doing his job. That is not a dysfunction. That is a message, a very deliberate, very targeted message. And the message was this: we are in charge, and we will prove it publicly, and there is nothing you can do about it. Let us talk about what the IRGC actually is, because most of the coverage you are seeing right now is treating the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps like a military faction inside a normal government. It is not. The IRGC is a state within a state. Through its construction arm, Khatam al-Anbiya, it controls enormous portions of Iran's infrastructure, oil services, petrochemicals, telecommunications, and banking. Through its proxy networks, it runs Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthi movement in Yemen, and various militias across Iraq and Syria. Through its intelligence wing, it manages domestic surveillance and political enforcement across the entire country. And through decades of patient political infiltration, it has colonized every major institution of the Iranian government from the inside. So when you ask why the IRGC would sabotage its own country's negotiations, the answer is cold and simple. Peace is more dangerous to the IRGC than war. If peace comes, the IRGC's budget gets scrutinized, its monopolies get questioned, its proxy networks lose their justification, and ordinary Iranians start asking why an organization that consumes such a massive portion of national wealth is even necessary. But if war continues, none of those questions get asked. The war itself becomes the answer to every question. This is why every single time a moderate Iranian official has come close to a real deal over the past 25 years, something has exploded. And this time is no different. Except this time, the IRGC is not even hiding it. The IRGC commander-in-chief is a man named Ahmad Wahidi. He was appointed on March 1, 2026, right as this war was escalating. Wahidi is not a typical general. He ran the Quds Force, Iran's overseas operations arm, from 1988 to 1997. He is on Interpol's Red Notice list for his alleged role in the 1994 AMIA bombing in Buenos Aires, Argentina, an attack that killed 85 people. This is the man who is now, functionally, running Iran. And here is what his organization has done in just the past 3 weeks. They reimposed the naval blockade of the Strait of Hormuz, directly contradicting the foreign minister who had just announced it was open. They forced Ghalibaf off the negotiating team after he reportedly tried to include the nuclear program as part of the talks. They reportedly blocked President Pezeshkian from appointing his own intelligence minister, with Wahidi ordering that all critical positions be handled exclusively by the IRGC until further notice. And the president of Iran can't even get a meeting with the supreme leader. Multiple requests, all denied. The man who is constitutionally the head of the executive branch is locked out of the executive branch. And then came the moment that confirmed everything. When news broke that Ghalibaf had resigned, Iranian authorities denied it immediately. The head of Parliament's communications office called the reports baseless, and within minutes, 3 of the most powerful men in Iran, Ghalibaf himself, President Pezeshkian, and Foreign Minister Arakchi, all posted nearly identical statements on their social media accounts, word for word, the same message about how there are no radicals or moderates in Iran, only Iranians and revolutionaries, all united under the supreme leader. 3 men, 1 script, published simultaneously. That is not coordination. That is dictation. Someone wrote those words, handed them to all 3 men, and forced them to publish. The denial proved the resignation. The unified message proved the divided regime. Iran's civilian leadership no longer controls its own voice. Now there is one more detail you need to hear because it tells you everything about where this ends. According to informed sources cited by multiple intelligence analysts this week, a military council of senior IRGC commanders has imposed a security cordon around the new supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, the son of Ali Khamenei. They are preventing him from receiving full government reports on the state of the country. Read that again slowly. The supreme leader of Iran is being kept in the dark by his own military. The man whose word is supposed to be constitutional law in the Islamic Republic is being managed, filtered, and effectively isolated by the men who are supposed to serve him. This is a coup, not the kind with tanks in the streets, the kind that happens in phone calls that do not get returned, in appointments that do not go through, in social media posts dictated by men in uniform, and it is happening right now. Here is the trap the IRGC has built for itself, and you need to see it clearly, because this is where the story reaches its most dangerous point. They need war to maintain power, but war is killing the economy. The International Monetary Fund estimates Iran's economy will shrink by more than 6% in 2026, with inflation approaching 70%. The Iranian rial has collapsed to roughly 1.3 million per US dollar, and the US naval blockade is tightening by the hour. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said it himself, nothing in, nothing out. Iran's main oil export terminal at Karg Island is filling up faster than the country can sell oil. Within days, Iran may be forced to physically shut in its own oil wells. Once a well shuts in, restarting it costs billions and permanently destroys 5 to 10% of its productive capacity forever. Iran would be destroying its own future just to survive the next few weeks. And the numbers behind this blockade are staggering. Iran is reportedly losing $500 million per day. The head of Iran's own central bank has privately urged the president to make a deal immediately, warning that the economy is on the edge of a collapse that could take more than a decade to rebuild from. But the president cannot get a meeting with the supreme leader, and the IRGC commanders who could stop the bleeding will not, because stopping the bleeding means losing power. So they are choosing the power, while the country bleeds. And the Iranian people know it. 3 months ago, nationwide protests erupted over the economy. The streets filled with people who had already lost everything and were willing to risk the rest. The IRGC crushed those protests, but the memory is still fresh, and the conditions are now dramatically worse. An unpaid IRGC is not a loyal IRGC. An unpaid Basij militiaman is not a regime defender. The same security apparatus that crushed protests in 2022 and 2025 cannot be relied upon to crush protests in 2026 if the salaries stop, and the salaries are already under pressure. Meanwhile, the Trump administration is doing something that most cable news networks are completely missing. It is not escalating militarily. It is not declaring diplomacy dead. It extended the ceasefire while tightening the blockade simultaneously. It is letting the IRGC fight its own civilian government. It is turning the economic heat up 1 degree at a time and waiting, because Trump's team understands what the IRGC does not seem to grasp. If you are going to consume yourself in an internal power struggle, the smartest thing your enemy can do is sit back, watch the collapse, and make sure every exit door gets a little more expensive to use. So here's where this ends, not with a clean answer, with 3 possible futures. In the first, the IRGC completes its coup. Qualibaf is replaced by Saeed Jalili, one of the most hardline nuclear negotiators in Iranian history, a man famous for sitting at tables for years and signing nothing. Negotiations become theater. The blockade continues. Inflation crosses 100%. Protests return, larger than anything Iran has seen since 1979. And the IRGC must decide whether to massacre its own people again or watch the regime fall. In the second, the economic pain becomes so unbearable that even the IRGC fractures. Junior commanders stop getting paid. Internal factions splinter. A back-channel deal gets made. Iran reopens the strait. Trump declares victory. Oil prices crash, the crisis pauses, but the structural problem, a paramilitary organization that has swallowed a government whole, that does not go away. It just waits for the next moment. And in the third, the one nobody wants to discuss, but every serious analyst is studying, the IRGC makes a final desperate gamble, a mass strike on Gulf infrastructure, an attack on American naval assets, or, in the worst case, a dash toward a nuclear weapon using Iran's undeclared enriched uranium stockpile. And at that point, there is no managed crisis anymore. There is only catastrophe. Here's the truth that this entire story has been building toward. The Islamic Republic of Iran, as it was constituted in 1979, is functionally over. The clerical regime that ruled for nearly 46 decades has been quietly replaced by a military regime wearing clerical clothes. The Constitution still says the supreme leader is in charge. The reality is that a man on Interpol's Red Notice list, wanted for an alleged terrorist bombing that killed 85 people in Argentina, is now effectively running a country of 92 million people, sitting on the world's third largest oil reserves with an advanced nuclear program. and the world is watching it happen in slow motion and calling it a political crisis. It is not a political crisis. It is a structural collapse. And the next 30 days will determine whether that collapse ends in a negotiated pause, a popular revolution, or something far worse. The men in uniform made their move. Now everything depends on whether the Iranian people, the international community, and the fractures inside the IRGC itself can stop what has already been set in motion. History is not waiting, and neither are you.